each noble truth has three aspects to them. So, and it's a reflective paradigm where that makes the statement there is suffering. It's just a fact, really. There is suffering, and that is a fact that can't be denied. And then the second aspect is suffering should be understood. So it kind of gives you direction of what to do about it, to understand it. And then the third aspect is the realization suffering has been understood. So you go through these three aspects. You start witnessing your own feelings, emotions that arise, because we're emotional creatures. We try to be rational and reasonable, but this experience of human existence is all about emotion and feeling. It's a sensitive experience where the intellect isn't sensitive. It's rational, but it doesn't feel anything. And then in suffering, it's a feeling that we have through living in a sensory world, in a sensory form, that we feel separation from. We think the world as an object, and it should be understood. So that's the recipe. Should be understood. Then you begin to look inward. Then you have the insight. I know now the suffering. These things where the suffering arises and ceases. So then the second noble truth is the causes of suffering, which is ignorance and attachment to desires. And this second noble truth is brought into my mind what desire really is. Because in my cultural background, desire usually means sensual desire. When you say somebody has a lot of desires, it means there's sexual desires or greed for food or something. But this divided desire into three aspects. The desire, sensual desire, which is quite obvious, and then desire for becoming. And I can see how, I wanted to become enlightened. I wanted to become something other than what I felt I was. I wanted to realize the truth. I wanted to become an arahant. And then the third form of suffering is vipavadana, which is desire to get rid of. And I realized how much of my life had been about trying to control, to get rid of anger, get rid of greed, get rid of jealousy, get rid of fear, because, as a reasonable person, I didn't like these emotions. I didn't want to feel jealous, even though I experienced that. I didn't want, in America of my generation, where men are supposed to be brave, not frightened. Brave. We're supposed to be brave all the time, but there's a lot to fear. Life is frightening, and the future is the unknown. So, right now with all the struggles in the world about war and climate change, and the future is rather frightening when you think about the future. And at that stage, I just wanted to be brave, a courageous man, get rid of the fear, and get rid of anger and aversion, and get rid of the things I didn't like in myself. and try to just hold on to the things I liked in myself. And I could see that these three forms of desire for sensory pleasure, desire for becoming something, desire to get rid of what you don't like, was very much my personality, and how I lived my life was just this moving with these different desires and as experienced through the sensory form of my body and mind. So then so then I started looking at desire, and I consciously brought up desire for becoming, wanting to become something, because I felt I'm imperfect, inadequate person, and I want to become perfect.
Sure.
And I want to become strong. I want to become enlightened. I want meaning for my life and purpose. I want something I emotionally, personally feel I don't have. And suddenly I could see all these desires for becoming something, because I saw myself as a flawed, weak, and self-centered person, and I didn't want to be like that. So I wanted to get rid of these negative conditions, and that's the desire to get rid of what you don't like. So I can see even my meditation was desire to get something that I imagined, and that something like that I created in my mind, and become an enlightened person, and then to get rid of these defilements. And then the insight is to let go of these desires. And with desire, you have to understand desire is life itself. It's all about desire. Where there's a desire realm, the body's a desire form. And when we identify with it, with the body, then we're caught in that vortex of desires, three kinds of desires, and throughout a lifetime that you don't know what you're doing. You're caught in this delusion of being a desire form that's imperfect, that was born in sin. If you're a Christian, that's what I was told, that I was born in sin. And then, so you're kind of automatically flawed goods when you're born, and then you're told that. And you know, as a innocent years of childhood, you believe what you're told. And so this sense of not being perfect, of not being flawed and damaged, and having these negative emotions like anger or fear or jealousy, or feeling depressed or worried. I was a worrier too. Spent a lot of time worrying about the future and guilt-ridden, and by feeling guilty about things I said or had done in the past that were called sins. So this was what life had led me to when I was 30 when I was a samanera, 31. And so the insight into the second noble truth, the causes of suffering, is to let go of the causes. Now, how do you let go of desire? You know, you understand the words and the instruction, but letting go of desire, you have to understand desire. And this is what the first noble truth and the second noble truth align themselves beautifully, because desire is suffering. You know, being attached to desires is form of suffering. And so desire is a condition that arises and ceases rather than a permanent problem on a personal level. And I began to just practice using a mantra saying, let go. So I found this, just instructing myself over and over to let go. And then one day, this was while I was samanera, I had a lot of resentment and anger that had been repressed over 30 years. And so I just let go of it, and I had to sit. I just sat in the hut and just watched this anger and hatred and resentment that I'd repressed. And I could do nothing about it. I couldn't meditate, couldn't practice samadhi practices, couldn't do anything but just sit there helplessly watching this angry habit. And eventually, after about 3 months of this hell realm, I woke up one morning and there was no anger. Even when I tried to think of things that would make me angry, they didn't make me angry. And so I thought, this is bliss. You know, I felt this sense of beauty and love and connection, and couldn't arouse any sense of anger or fear. And of course, I thought I was enlightened, because I'd never experienced that. Such a graceless, a state of grace such as that. And that was, lasted about a week. I was in this kind of luminous state of bliss, and everything was beautiful. And then I had to renew my visa, and they had an immigration office in Nong Khai, so I went there, and they were very rude to me. And in that rudeness, this whole luminous state of bliss suddenly collapsed totally. And I went back, they finally unwillingly extended my visa, but then I went back to the monastery and tried to get back this state that I was now a memory, and I couldn't do it. And that's where I really began to see I needed more than just I began to take an interest in Vinaya, which I had no interest in before, the discipline of a monk. Began to realize I needed to learn to submit rather than just promote myself and try to become an enlightened person again. I thought maybe within the confines, the restrictions of the traditional Vinaya form might be very helpful to me to deal with my manipulative tendencies and arrogance.